So when I remove a trauma, the first thing you experience is just like this release of this burden that you didn't even know was there. It's just like your soul becomes light. And then it's like, and you're like, oh my gosh, like it feels like, 500-pound weight is gone. Like you keep
Right.
stacking on problems, on problems, on problems. You feel fine, you feel fine, you feel fine. The second you overload your mind, a switch flicks and you are in crisis immediately. Your whole mind unravels, you become suicidal, all this stuff. And you thought you were fine up until that moment, and that's when everything falls apart because everything was just being buried.
So you've just got to push through. It's like how do you educate them to a point where they go, actually, this may be something to get ahead of the curve on.
If you think there's something to push through, that's the problem.
that's a very good point. Yeah. So welcome back to another episode. Today we have Jedediah Thomas with us. This is going to already be an interesting one, I can tell. We're going to dive into a lot of different topics. But for those who don't know you, Jedediah, if you wouldn't mind, just give a real quick intro, let the people know who you are, and then we'll jump straight in.
Sure thing. So I'm Jedediah. I call myself the Mind Master. People are skeptical of that until they work with me. They're like, holy crap, he's right. So I've been in the mindset space a little over a year now. So not last December, but the December before last. Just kind of fell into it for kind of a couple accidental reasons, but then I got really good really quick, and I've been doing that pretty much ever since.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. And when you say obviously you've been in the mindset space for just over a year,
Mhm.
just elaborate on that a little bit. When you say in that, do you mean just like you've been like teaching that and kind of coaching on that, or is that just when you started your journey into that sort of concept?
Yeah, so that's just when I started actually working on people.
Mhm.
So my exposure to the actual like self-help type of space was probably about 9 years ago. I got severely traumatized. Like my entire life got flipped on its head. Like I had no self-identity, so no self-esteem, like nothing. Like I was so mentally gone. I was like staring at a wall for like weeks at a time. Like I just couldn't process like the things that had happened to me. And so I kind of like that started my journey to try and fix myself from that. So I looked into like hypnotherapy and NLP and like everything I could find, like normal therapy, CBD, like everything, and nothing really worked to fix that.
Mhm.
And then I kind of put that on a back shelf. And then I kind of got into like the sales world and stuff like that. And then I ended up kind of wanting to get into the mindset space to help people.
Mhm.
And because I ended up as a sales coach, and I was like, well, I was doing sales coaching on my own because I got fairly good at that, and then there was a conflict of interest, and then I was like, okay, well, I can't do sales coaching, but I can do some kind of coaching. What kind of coach can I be? Heck, I'll be a mindset coach. Right? I have all this training. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. Right? So my first client, basically, I created a couple methodologies that ended up being more powerful than anything else that anyone had ever seen, and it just like fixed a whole lot of stuff real quickly.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's really interesting. So you kind of it was something that you worked on for yourself, and then when you got the opportunity, it was just like, oh well, let's see if this will work with other people,
well,
basically, and
it's
how
funny
can I
because
help
I
them?
fixed other people before I even like knew that I could fix myself.
Oh,
It's like
really?
I was just like someone came to me. It's like, hey, you want to be a mindset coach? I'll be your first client. I'm like, cool. And they're like, hey, I have XYZ problem. How can you help me? I'm like, I have no clue, but I'll figure it out. Right. So I did.
Yeah, that's funny, man. So, but I think that does speak to the fact that we are more willing, or at least majority of us are more willing to do more for others than we are for ourselves, right? We
Yeah.
want what's if someone like that came to you and you're like, I really want to do a good job for them, I really want to make sure I
Mhm.
help them and that, yeah, we sit on our own and go, I can do better than this, like,
Yeah.
or just beat ourselves up. And that's interesting. That's really interesting. So would you mind expanding a little bit on some of your methodologies and your thoughts that you've created then? Like just give us a bit of an overview of what that kind of entails or looks like.
Yeah. So the reason why I can do what I can do is because I have a different model of the mind than what science uses.
Right.
So basically, what science would say is our most fundamental level is our biology, our, neurochemicals, our, signals in our body. I actually know of a deeper layer than that. We
Okay.
could get into the spiritual side of that. We could get into the physics side of
Mhm.
that, but you could call it the soul. And all of these problems that cause all of these higher level problems occupy that space. And so what
Right.
I do is I actually work on that layer that science doesn't even know exists. And I basically narrowed down like 95% of all problems in the mind are traumas and limiting beliefs. Right. And
Mm.
a trauma, what that is like one situation that happened over minutes or hours that like created a snapshot in your mind and like you can't move past it. Like no amount of time will fix it. You're just like stuck in that situation. Like part of you will never move past that. That's one thing. And the limiting beliefs, what I call beliefs are not what everyone calls beliefs. Like it's like the actual binary coding of the soul, right? Zeros and ones, this electrical digits. And so I go in and I flip those digits and it resolves all the problems.
Wow. That sounds really interesting because I saw one of your videos
Mm-hmm,
where you showed the difference between NLP and then what you
mm-hmm,
do,
yeah.
and you talked about NLP literally just puts a frame around it rather than
Mm-hmm,
change it. So I thought that was really interesting because obviously I've dove into NLP and I'm not going to say I'm an expert by any means, but
mm-hmm,
I've got a fair decent understanding, and changing the frames and all that kind of made sense,
mm-hmm,
but it's an interesting thought to think that you're not changing anything. So
right.
technically nothing's actually been fixed because if your frame switches back through any action. And I guess is that what made you want to like dig into this and change it, or was it a bit of an accident how you kind of
It
dug into
was an
that? Or...
accident. Like I didn't even know that this stuff existed. It's like I started changing stuff and I didn't know why I could do that so powerfully so quickly. And so like all of that, what I know is the research after the fact of like trying to figure out why
Yeah.
I'm so effective, like which is crazy, right? So my methodology didn't come from my knowledge. My knowledge came from my methodology.
Mm,
But so the difference between NLP and what I do, NLP is really great for sales. Like it's like one of the most effective like persuasion tools out there. And the reason why it's good is because you can get someone in a certain mind frame and it
mm,
wears off right after a sales call, right?
yeah.
So like it's for like you said, you get in a different frame, like you sell them, and then now they're back to normal. You haven't actually changed anything, right?
Yeah.
And then so like Tony Robbins, he does more of like a therapeutic type of NLP, but he'll kind of make you doubt that you actually have a problem, right? And so it's almost kind of like running a logical
Mm,
bypass of like the problem is still there, but your mind is now ignoring it, right?
right.
But on kind of a practical level, when I change a digit in your mind, you're sitting there like like your whole mind is rewriting it yourself for like a couple minutes, and it's like the reality changes. It's like it's way too powerful to use on a sales call because it like literally will
Right.
will permanently be there and change how they operate in their life like forever, right? It's like crazy.
That's insane. That's really interesting though. Two things on that. I want to dive
Yeah.
more into what how you finished that, but when you talk about changing the frame and then also the therapeutic, the idea of ignoring the problem, so that
Mm-hmm.
view, because I've I was watching a video of Tony Robbins and a lady was talking about something like ADHD and type of
Mm-hmm.
that sort of things. And the way he responded to her actually made me think, does he know what he's talking about with
Mm-hmm.
regards to kind of certain conditions and things? But you've said it in a way then I'm like, maybe I've just seen it in a different way to what he was thinking. So do you feel like that is more his route then, or that style is more about don't worry about the problem. Let's forget you even have a problem and you can carry on kind of almost like a placebo effect, I guess. Like, oh, there's nothing to worry about, so you can be fine. Is that the idea
It's
of that, do
it's
you think?
it's it's more powerful than a placebo effect, but in reality, so our mind works very much like a computer. Like if you know what a computer is, you know how the mind works. Psychology is not the study of the mind. Computer science, electrical engineering is the study of the mind. Okay. So
Interesting.
if you look at it like, okay, you have on your desktop a file that's like virus.exe or whatever, right? And you're like, okay, I'm not going to delete that, but I'm going to create a new folder and I'm just going to put that file in the folder. So, the
Hmm.
computer, like you don't see it, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind of what NLP does. So it's not really a placebo effect in the sense that they're convincing themselves that they're better. It's that your mind is bypassing actually reading that code, right? So
Mm,
the code is still there, but now it's saying, okay, when this code happens, then I skip up to this code, and now it's
Yeah.
like it's just sandwiched there. So it works until it doesn't, right? Like he
Yeah.
does get a lot of people, a lot of quick effects, but the issue is that you can only bury so much, right? Like you keep
Right.
stacking on problems, on problems, on problems. You feel fine, you feel fine, you feel fine. The second you overload your mind, a switch flicks and you are in crisis immediately. Your whole mind unravels, you become
Mm,
suicide, all this stuff. And you thought you were fine up until that moment. And that's when everything falls apart because everything was just being buried.
yeah. Yeah. Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. So for you, it's right. Instead of having that and that build up, it's like let's just get rid of it completely, basically. Let's just wipe it
Exactly.
off the
I
disk.
delete the virus.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a really interesting view. Um Okay. So for you then, like, what's the sort of things when we're talking about, viruses or whatever those issues are, what are the sort of things that you would be looking to help people get through or get over? Because you mentioned like trauma and things like that, but is there a way to quantify a little bit of the type of things that you generally deal with or help people through or?
There's not a general. It's like my premise is pretty much I can fix anything in the mind that's not like a willpower issue. So like personality disorders is like the one thing I don't work on because there's nothing actually mechanically wrong with them. They just choose to be like an evil psycho person. And it's like there's no way to fix that, right? But
Right.
anything mechanical I can fix. So one of my clients, I was able to get him off of 16 to 18 antidepressants in just one session, right?
Wow.
And that was like by accident. I was just trying to help him. I've fixed things that are not supposed to be fixable by science. I'll say that. Like I don't want to
Okay.
I don't want to say too much to get myself
Sure.
in trouble, but
Sure.
you know the science has no clue how the mind works, like absolutely zero clue, and it's all fixable, and it's just a mechanical problem of flipping the digits.
That's really interesting. Why do you feel that's the case? Why do you feel that, what we're taught and the science side and everything, why do you feel that hasn't uncovered what you're kind of uncovering here?
Because they're afraid to acknowledge the existence of the soul. They don't understand the science behind why there is a soul, and they're afraid of the implications that there is a soul.
Mm, interesting. Yeah. Okay. That's giving me some thought. So yeah, okay. So because
We
that
can
that
go as weird or as normal as you want. The
Hey, I
rabbit
love
hole
this.
goes deep.
Yeah, no, this is great. And yeah, this is really interesting to me because I think too often we act, especially in the West, we act as though everything is already understood and we know it and all that. And then you look around and go, well, I'm pretty sure if we knew it all, everyone would be a little bit better.
Right.
Just in whatever sense that word means. But okay, so I don't expect you to give any kind of, your own secrets away or anything on this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so I'm trying to think of the best way to ask these questions without, putting you in that sort of position. But for you, then, I know you mentioned you help someone get off a crazy amount of antidepressants in one session. What
Mm-hmm.
what is like a typical? I guess there's no typical, but when you're working with people, have you noticed there seems to be a time period it seems to work within,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, or like how long are you normally working with people through these issues?
So it really depends on what the issues are before they come to me because I'm very methodical in what I do. I will remove trauma by trauma by trauma. And it
Mhm.
just depends on like how many traumas, how many beliefs you had that are contributing to an external problem. So
Yeah.
for example, like the way I start working with someone is just with a one trauma removal so they can see how it works and that it's effective on all this stuff. One person I was able to fix a decades long pornography habit just by five minute trauma removal, right? So
Wow.
maybe 10 minutes, okay, full disclosure, right?
Sure.
maybe it took the full 10 minutes, but totally gone, right? Because it was
Wow.
just it was based on one trauma. But if you have multiple traumas, multiple beliefs, so like ADHD, the symptoms are kind of a compound effect of a lot of traumas, a lot of beliefs. And so it takes a lot more to actually kind of work through that. So there's no like normal length of time, but we work until you're better, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then how do people kind of respond, after the fact, right? So obviously not within the
Mm-hmm.
session, but like let's say a week's gone by and things are gone. How often do you find people maybe think about the fact they're not acting that way anymore, or it kind of, where they normally I would have responded this way, but I didn't even need to this time, like those sort of responses.
The change is immediate. Like it actually happens in the session. So with traumas, that's kind of more of, if you're familiar with boilers, you have kind of like the fire side and the water side. I actually have a video about that because I used to work on boilers. But so say the traumas is more like the emotional side, like the fire side, right?
Mhm.
So it's more, you feel it more. So when I remove a trauma, the first thing you experience is just like this release of this burden that you didn't even know was there. It's just like your soul becomes light, and then it's like, and you're like, oh my gosh, like it feels like 500-pound weight is gone, right? And then
Right.
so like, because the process that I do is so intense on the mind, they like get tired immediately. They got to go to bed, drink a lot of water, and they might have a headache for a day or two, but then their whole world starts to rewrite itself. Like all the pain comes out, all like everything starts to change, and then like they start realizing like I can't even recall that trauma anymore, right? Like it's gone, right? And now they're acting different, they're thinking different, all that. So that's the trauma side. The belief side, kind of the water side, is more of like logical based, because it is that the binary coding. So they feel light, but it's a different kind of light. It's not like your release of burden. It's like a lightning bolt straight to their head, and like that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, it's just like their whole mind just starts rewriting itself, and they see the world differently immediately, and then they start acting different. It's just like they just become a totally different person. Like
Wow.
not like I'm creating different versions of people, but like they become more themselves, right? Who they want to be.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And you mentioned obviously with certain things where it's a maybe more of a choice or a decision to act in certain ways that
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned they may not be the ideal people to work with because it's a lot harder to kind of get through. So what role, so you work with people, what role do they take in this whole experience, if that makes sense?
They just have to sit back and be open and honest with me and let me in their mind.
Mm.
I don't hypnotize them. I don't, do kind of these weird like tapping, like I don't know, body stuff. I just have a conversation with you and I fix the problem.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So as long as they're willing to be open, and that's where those certain conditions may prevent it from working because they're not willing to actually let it open up, basically.
That's the thing with personality disorders. It's like they probably have traumas and limiting beliefs just like everyone else. Like there's no mechanical difference between their problems. The problem is that instead of saying, oh, there's something wrong with me, I need help, they say I'm hurting and I want to hurt others like I'm hurting.
Mm,
That's the problem.
yeah.
So that's not that. I don't touch that, right? Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
should be medicated and locked up, but that's like the only thing that like
Yeah, I getcha. That makes sense. That makes total sense. I can see why that wouldn't work in the. I mean,
yeah,
that's why therapy and counseling and all that wouldn't work as well, right? Because
right,
it's not working to overcome the issue.
yeah.
Um, okay. And have you? I know you said that you developed this before working on yourself. So have you since put yourself through that process, or is that something that's
Yeah,
harder to do
yeah,
on yourself?
absolutely.
Or
It's so I started. I think it was like 3 or 4 people I just kind of did as test subjects, and like one of the people I worked with, he was former Marine Scout sniper. He spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in every other methodology that's out there, like EMDR, CBT, you name it, like RT, like a lot of stuff, and I was able to like fix him very quickly. He's like, this is the most powerful thing I've ever seen. And like after a couple, I didn't believe it. And I was like, is it really this good? So then I tried it on myself, and I'm like, holy cow, I'm good now. like everything is amazing. So I fixed a lot of traumas in myself.
that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And you talk about traumas almost as though they're all individual things to work through, right? So, because
Yes.
a lot of times we just have the word trauma, it's just like, oh,
Hmm.
I've got a trauma, or, PTSD is just thrown around. And
Hmm.
sometimes it can be kind of construed as though trauma is just this big
Yeah.
thing, right? But you seem to talk about it throughout this podcast as, a work through, a stage, things like that. How do you differentiate when you're talking to people, or how do you kind of go, right, this I can see which one I'm working on? Do you know what I mean? How are you separating those when you're talking to people?
So I have a series of diagnostic documents that I give people. One is like a trauma doc, one is kind of more like, general overview type of thing.
Mm,
But when people come to me, they kind of have that mindset of like, oh, I had a traumatic childhood. Okay, like what does that
mm,
mean? Like, okay, 10 years were traumatic. Okay, well, when you really look at it, even though it feels traumatic, there are specific situations that happened at different times that made you permanently different. So if you look at, say, like a soldier goes to war, PTSD, comes back, it all looks like the same thing, like war, PTSD. But when you actually ask questions and when you find out there was like a specific moment, maybe they were in the trench, maybe their buddy was next to them, their buddy head got blown off, something like that. Now that's the trauma, right? Not the war, not being shot at, none of this stuff. That was it. That's the thing that I fixed, and like all the symptoms go away.
yeah, interesting. So you're looking for almost like a trigger event for each moment, and then you
It,
can kind of see where that started more so.
yeah, like literally like the definition, like the actual mechanics of a trauma is it
Yeah,
happens over minutes or hours.
right.
Like it's an actual natural reaction of our mind, and that's what I fix.
Yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. That's really interesting. Um, okay. And I guess a big question for me would be, now you know you've been doing this for a year, now you know how effective this is.
Mhm.
What's your plan moving forward with this, right? Because it sounds like you found this thing that could could have a huge impact on a lot of different things. So like what's your
Yeah.
plans moving forward with all this?
Well, there's the rabbit hole. So
Okay.
what I what I
Let's go.
realized what I realized is this is so unbelievably powerful. The government is probably going to have an issue with it. The mental health industry is going to have an issue with it because it is more effective than anything else. So what I'm actually doing is creating a religion around it. So what I want to do is protect it by religious freedom of this is actually a spiritual practice, right? Because we are working on the
Wow.
soul level. So you can't, stop us from doing that, right? So what I'm doing is as I grow the religion, as I grow that, as I get on clergy, what I want to do is actually train the clergy in my methodology, so then that will allow it to scale and actually help a lot more people.
This is a rabbit hole.
I told you, man. Like we can go way
That
deeper than this. How
that
deep
is
do you want to
amazing.
go?
That's a fascinating concept. I'd never considered that way of protecting uh I guess knowledge you could call it or whatever, but that's a fascinating route to take it. So
Yeah,
so that's where you're thinking of going then. So you're going to build this out and kind of go around that way. Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. So I guess for you then, is this because I think what I see from people when they kind of have good ideas, there seems to be a big drop off of the amount of people who then actually are able to get themselves to take action on it, right? And I'm sure this
Mhm.
is something you deal with people on, in your sessions as well, um, because it's probably something to do with their past or trauma that stops them moving forward. For you, moving this forward, then is it a gradual, step by step, be very careful sort of process, or is it you know where you want to go and it's like I'm just going to push the snowball down the hill as quick as possible and just try and get to that point?
It's a little bit of both. I kind of have to navigate the waters like legally and whatnot and figure all
Mhm.
that stuff out. And so that's kind of like the thing that would slow me down. But other than that, it's like I really am trying to get this out there as fast as possible. The more people that I can help, like the
Mm.
world is just going to be a better place. Like
Yeah.
if you look at the mental health industry, that like it just grows every year. And if it was actually fixing people, why is that the case? But
Yeah.
my aim is to fix the problems fast enough so they don't have to come back to me, right? So I fix them and they're done. And then it's like then like the people that need to be fixed actually gets less and less every year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you got um have you got anybody that you kind of look up to that you know how any kind of methodology
Mm-hmm.
normally has a family tree, let's call it, right? So you
Yeah,
look at Tony Robbins and then you go back to like Bandler, right? And you move up the ladder.
yeah.
Is there someone that you kind of saw that was doing that they were like so close to maybe making this discovery and you were kind of like, that's interesting, I'll dig into that more, or is this kind of completely fresh?
Yeah, on the trauma side, yes. On the belief side, no. So I'll dig into that. So the belief side, I figured that out because of like a situation that happened to me. My belief shifted
Mm.
And I experienced that same thing, and I kind of like reverse engineered it. I was like, how did that happen? And I'm now able to recreate it very effectively. The trauma side, I actually read a book. It's a guy, what's his name? He wrote Waking the Tiger. Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine. That's his name. So he wrote a book about trauma. He's actually a psychologist. And basically 95, 99% of my theory about trauma comes from his book. Now,
Mhm.
he came up with a methodology that doesn't work, right?
Right.
So when you read the book and you're like, okay, now I know about trauma, now I want to fix it. And like it doesn't actually fix the trauma. But when I
Right.
saw that, I was like, I might be able to actually figure out a better way to do that. So that's what I came up with that. Now, my overall kind of theory of the mind itself um, was initially very largely based, believe it or not, on Dianetics from the Church of Scientology.
Mhm.
Um, so they got probably 50% right, and there's 50% that they weren't sure about, but they got a lot closer than most of science. So I kind of started with
Mhm.
that as a foundation, and then it's like as I learned new things, I was like, okay, that's not right. I need to change this. I need to do this. So it kind of developed
Mhm.
from that foundation, but now it's like completely different. It's nothing like what they do or believe. So
Yeah, no, of course that's interesting because yeah, it's always interesting to see where people pull some inspiration from,
mhm,
right? To create anything new.
yeah.
Um, one question, or I don't know if this would be a concern or if this is a worldview or a belief that maybe needs changing, right? What's your take on people who maybe want to work through something? Maybe they're not even
Mhm,
sure what that thing is. They're just like, I feel like, something's holding me back. There's a block, there's all that side. What's your take on the thing that would be one person saying, I want to fix this, and then the
mhm,
other view of going, that's just the easy way out. You know what I mean? Because I see
mhm,
both worldviews, right? I see people who are like that want the answer to something, and half of that time is probably really valid. Half the time it could be
mhm.
an excuse. Then you have the other worldview that says, no, you have to power through everything. There is no quick fix, things like that. How would you answer those sort of topics?
Yeah, I do run into that. That's kind of one of the biggest things I'm trying to combat actually, because none of the methods out there actually fix the problem. So you put in all this effort with therapy, years of therapy, and you're just trying to fix it. And so you start to, instead of identifying with being better, you start to identify with the effort it's taking you to get better,
Mm,
right? So they think, oh, I put in all of this years, I put in all of this hard work, right? Like I'm getting better, right? And they sell themselves on that. And then I come along, I'm like, oh, I can fix that in 5 minutes. And they're like, what was the point, right? Like, why did I
right.
spend all these years of
Yeah.
therapy? And I'm like, well, it's not your fault. It's like the system is just designed to like keep you on this like going up the mountain and the rock pushes you down kind of thing. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like I want to get people to where they experience healing and then they're like, this is way better, right? Like
Yeah.
once they actually, it's like, okay, it doesn't matter whether I just found this guy or whether I've been trying for years. Like I'm better now, and life can actually be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel a lot of therapy and a lot of counseling and all that side is coping strategies rather than fixing issues, right? It's how can you cope with that feeling? How can you
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like how can you carry on with life but just deal with that thing a little bit better?
That is exactly it. So I call my methodology non-therapeutic because it's like everything else is just like repeated input, just trying to make yourself feel better or lower the emotions and stuff. And I just go in there like, boop, it's gone, right? So it's not therapy because it's like I actually mechanically fix the problem.
Hmm.
Um, I think we were going somewhere. Remind me of what you just said. My mind went.
Oh, the quick fix versus that one where people are like there is no quick fix, that kind of route.
I was going to say something. I lost my mind on
Ah,
it.
I'm sure it'll come back.
It was good though. Calling me for more.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. The little teaser, just so people want more. But no, this is a really interesting topic and subject for me because I've gone through a lot of different things and I'm
Yeah.
still working through a lot of different things. And I think I've resigned myself to the coping strategies are all that
Right.
there is. Like, because, I did CBT at one point,
Hmm.
which was okay, I
Yeah.
suppose. Right? Like they go 6 or 8 sessions and then you never have to see us again. You're kind of like, okay. So you go and then you don't go back just because you kind of like, well, it didn't really work, but
Yeah.
if I go back, then I've got to kind of say it didn't work. Then you'll blame
In
me,
six
right?
sessions, you won't want to see us again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the guy actually was like, I've not had any clients come back to me after this and blah, blah. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be the first, so I won't come back
Right.
either, right?
Oh my gosh.
But it's a
Ah.
really interesting topic because I do think there's a lot of actually, let me ask you this. Do you come from a religious background by any chance?
I did. I grew up Christian, and then that was actually kind of the source of all of my trauma. And so
Mm,
then, like the last 9 years were kind of like I knew that was false, but I didn't know what the truth was. So then I was trying to find the
mm.
truth. And then in the process of that, I discovered all this, but then I actually found there actually is a religious spiritual side to it. And so then that's now, we can go down that rabbit hole if you want.
Yeah, why I asked is one, obviously some of the use of your words like healing, right, and things
Yeah,
like that is obviously people outside of a religion who have never been in that very rarely think in those terms. Is at
yeah.
least from what I've seen, right?
Hmm.
And I think that also makes people, if you've never been religious, you don't see that there is another level,
Yeah,
so you can never even contemplate not having this level, right? Whereas when you're
right.
brought up in a religious environment in any form, there's always there's something that you can't see, which
Yeah,
allows us then to because I was raised in a Christian family as well, right?
yeah,
So regardless of what my beliefs are now, I always have that part of me that's like, there might be something, there is something that
yeah.
you can't see, there is, and I think that allows you to explore things in a different way as well, right? Because
Right.
you can go, you almost were raised in a way where you're like, well, of course there's this person that can fix everything, so that kind of works in your head. So then when you get to this, you're like, oh, maybe there is a way. So
Yeah.
I suppose I don't know if that is a rabbit hole you want to go down. I'm happy not to if you don't want to go there, but I suppose like what do you see as the religious side of it now then, or at least in a way that you can kind of explain for your current model or method?
So, I mean, like, I'm a very pragmatic, very practical minded person. Everything I try and do is scientifically based. And
Mhm,
so, kind of the reason why I really liked Dianetics when I was, started reading it, I was, probably 7, 8 years ago, maybe
mhm,
6, 7 years ago. They were very like similar minded. They want to have an explanation for everything. And then when I actually started getting into this work, there was stuff that was not explainable by any scientific model. Like, as part of me fixing one of my clients, I had to actually do exorcisms on demonic possession. Like I
wow.
actually removed demons from people, and I was like, that's not what I was expecting. Like I didn't go into it thinking that that's what was going to happen or that's what the problem was, but I was like, okay, that's the problem. Okay, so there's clearly like
Wow.
bigger things here, and then I kind of like reverse enginered like the existence of the spiritual reality from fixing people, and I was like, okay, if that works, then this has to be true, right? If
Mhm,
I fix this way, there has to be a chakra, right? If I fix this way,
right.
there has to be demons. Like, so I kind of like reconstructed um my model of reality from the ground up, as opposed to what you're saying, which is kind of like assuming that it's real and then
Mhm,
kind of filling it in from there.
yeah. That's interesting. You really can go in many different rabbit holes on this conversation,
Dude,
right?
like that's just surface level. Like it gets a
No,
whole lot weirder.
yeah, no, that's fascinating. So for you then, for the sake of this conversation, I guess how would you best describe um the moment that people would kind of go, maybe this is something I need support going through, or I need to come to Jedediah, or maybe this is a type of thing I need to work, because a lot of limiting beliefs by their nature are
Yeah.
hidden from us, right? So how would you kind of help people who maybe even just starting to think of it, like kind of come to terms with maybe this is what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so there's kind of two major groups of people I work on. One group is already in crisis. They've tried everything. They know they have a problem and nothing is working to fix it, right? So those are the people that, like, by the time they get to me, they're desperate and they just want an answer, right? So they're really, they know they have a problem, so I don't have to convince them. The other group of people is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where you're burying all of the problems and you don't think you have a problem until you hit crisis, right?
Yeah.
And so kind of my efforts are going towards trying to figure out how to reach those people before it becomes a problem, and actually kind of educate them on how the mind works, and why these situations can start to stick up, how they start to affect your behaviors, your thought patterns, your emotions, all this stuff. And I'm trying to kind of get into more preventative work, and not actually kind of like I have, say, like a pornography addiction, I fix pornography. I don't want to get down that road. I like, or I want to just take action or whatever. I want to actually start to heal people before they need it, right? And actually prevent all of these problems, because like once those problems happen, then their life falls apart, and then it's like then they have much bigger problems. So
yeah, and I think that probably brings its own list of things to figure out now, right? Because you're trying to make people have an awareness of something that they may even actively be trying to avoid being aware of right now, like, which comes back to that question earlier, right? Of the people that say, oh, there is no quick fix, you've just got to push through. It's like, how do you educate them to a point where they go, actually, this may be something to get ahead of the curve on, right?
So,
That's
I mean, the answer is kind of in the question there. If you think there's something to push through, that's the
fair.
problem.
That's a very
Like,
good point. Yeah,
now, okay,
that's a
so
good point.
traumas is a lot easier to see, because you generally know the point in time that happened. It was a traumatic event. Now your emotions are different, so that's a lot more obvious. The beliefs are very difficult to see, because we have kind of subconscious defenses against us seeing our beliefs, right? So in part of my work, I'm exploring the limits of the mind. I approached my own belief level trying to troubleshoot a problem, and it felt like I got hit by napalm in my brain and almost collapsed in the shower. Like, that's how powerful and deep this
Wow.
stuff is. Like, you're just not supposed to go there, right? So you can't see your own beliefs, but you can see the effects of the beliefs that you have. So if you want to take action, maybe like ask a girl out on a date and you can't, there's something holding you back, there's a belief, right? If you want to be a millionaire, own your own business, and for some reason you're stuck working at a 9 to 5 job, and you're just making $60,000 a year, there's something wrong there. There's some belief that's making you feel like you need to stay there, or that you can't actually do what you want to do. So it's like you kind of have to look at your life and see how that kind of reflects, and then I can actually see what the beliefs are. You need someone else to help you with that, because that's another rabbit hole. When I need my own beliefs shifted, I have to have my clients help me with it. So it's like it's not just a sales pitch. It's like literally it's just not meant to happen.
Yeah.
But you just know that there's a problem. It might not be an emotional problem, but there's something not right in your life and you want it fixed. And then that's when you know that there's something that needs fixing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if your life is perfect, you don't need to be fixed. But if it's anything less than perfect, you probably do.
Yeah. No, I think that's valid. I think, like you said as well, right? It's not a sales pitch to say you need someone else to help you, because you can't look at your own face without something else to look through, right? It's
Yeah,
if you need that other person there to tell you. So
yeah.
that's totally valid, man. Well, I want to honor your time. This has been a really, really fascinating conversation, and there's a lot of rabbit holes that I'm desperate to go down, but we don't have the time for. So maybe we'll continue this conversation definitely offline, and then maybe have you back on for another episode. That'd be
Yeah.
fascinating. But before we jump off, how can people get in touch with you if you want to get them to follow your stuff? I know you've got some things on YouTube and Facebook and places. So put it out there for them, and then I'll drop the links in the description as well.
Yeah, so really the best place to get in touch with me is on Facebook, but don't look for my Facebook profile, because like I really don't accept friend requests. It has nothing to do with you. It's just like, I just don't. So I have a Facebook group. It's a free group. It's called The Mysteries of the Mind. Just look for it. Fairly small right now. I just started it, a couple months ago, but I am growing it. But get in that. I put a lot of educational stuff in there. I link, my YouTube and whatnot. So that's kind of like my central hub. If you want to find me and what I do, that's the best place to come. I also have a YouTube, The Mastered Mind. So you can find me on there. But really, the Facebook group is the best place. And Dave said he's going to drop the links for you, so you'll see that. But don't send me a friend request. Join the group.
Perfect. That sounds good. Well, Jedediah, really do appreciate your time. This has been fascinating. Thank you for sharing all this with us, and looking forward to seeing where your journey takes you as well. It's going to be a good one to watch. Okay.
Awesome. Well, it's
awesome.
Pleasure being on. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure, man.